The prophecy of the 3 days of darkness stands as one of the most mysterious and widely debated narratives ever attributed to Padre Pio. For decades, faithful Catholics have passed this story from one generation to the next, describing a future time in which the entire world would be wrapped in a profound darkness, not merely physical, but spiritual in its very essence. According to this tradition, for 3 full days and 3 full nights, humanity would experience a total blackout, a terrifying absence of light in which the only possible response would be to remain inside one's home, pray without ceasing, and place absolute trust in divine protection alone. From the very beginning, it is important to be honest about what we know and what we don't. No official church document has ever definitively confirmed this prophecy as an authentic, verified statement of Padre Pio. There is no signed letter, no recorded homily, no formal declaration that describes the 3 days of darkness in the precise and detailed form so often repeated in popular devotion. What does exist is a tradition, rich, persistent, emotionally powerful, that has circulated for generations in Catholic communities around the world, linking this image not only to the Capuchin friar from Pietrelcina, but also to other mystics and visionaries throughout Christian history. Rather than focusing on catastrophic timelines or apocalyptic predictions, many thoughtful interpreters see in this message, above all, a strong and urgent call to conversion, to spiritual watchfulness, and to prayer. Padre Pio, born Francesco Forgiueni in 1887 in the small southern Italian village of Pietrelcina, was one of the most remarkable religious figures of the 20th century. From his earliest years, he showed a depth of spiritual longing that set him apart from the ordinary rhythms of village life. He entered the order of Friars Minor Capuchin as a young man, and it was within the walls of monastic discipline and silence that his mystical gifts began to manifest in ways that would eventually draw pilgrims from every corner of the earth. He became known throughout the world for the stigmata, the wounds of Christ's crucifixion which he bore on his body for 50 years, for his extraordinary life of prayer that consumed virtually every waking hour, and for a mysterious ability to read into the depths of human hearts. His life was marked by intense physical suffering, ecclesiastical investigations, long periods of restriction and misunderstanding. And yet, through all of it, an unending flood of faithful souls sought him out for confession, counsel, and the inexplicable comfort of his presence. When we turn to his authentic writings and his verified teachings, a consistent and deeply human message emerges with unmistakable clarity. Padre Pio spoke often of God's justice, but far more insistently of his mercy. He urged people to approach the sacrament of confession with genuine courage and sincerity. He recommended the rosary with an almost relentless enthusiasm. He reminded his spiritual children, ober and ober, that suffering, when embraced rather than fled, could become one of the most direct paths toward holiness. In this light, the idea of a coming time of darkness finds a natural home within his broader vision. It might be understood as a symbol of a profound global spiritual crisis, a moment in which humanity, having turned away from God, finds itself submerged in the consequences of its own choices, groping in a darkness largely of its own making. The traditional description of the 3 days of darkness is vivid and unsettling. According to accounts passed down through generations, the darkness would be so thick and impenetrable that no artificial light, no lamp, no electric bulb, no torch could pierce it. Strange and terrifying phenomena would accompany this blackout. The very air would become dangerous, even fatal, for those who were not in a state of grace. Only blessed candles, it was said, would be capable of providing any light at all, and even they would burn with a diminished flame. People were instructed to stay inside their homes, to seal their windows and doors, to pray continuously, and above all, to resist any temptation to look outside, regardless of what voices, sounds, or cries they might hear in the streets. Whoever ventured out during those 3 days would be exposed to grave, potentially mortal dangers. The message was clear. The home was the only sanctuary, prayer was the only armor, and faith was the only light. It must be said again, with transparency, that these specific details do not appear in any document officially signed by Padre Pio. They belong instead to a broader apocalyptic tradition that has resurfaced periodically throughout Christian history, particularly in times of great social upheaval, moral confusion, or collective fear. And yet the persistence of this imagery across centuries and cultures suggests that it resonates with something deep in the human soul, the ancient fear of darkness and the equally ancient hope that it cannot last forever. The Bible itself offers a striking foundation for this kind of imagery. In the book of Exodus, one of the 10 plagues visited upon Egypt was a darkness so absolute that people could not see one another, could not rise from where they sat, for 3 consecutive days. The number was not accidental. 3 days, in the symbolic universe of Scripture, carries enormous theological weight. It is the time of waiting, of hidden transformation, of apparent defeat before unexpected victory. It mirrors the silence of Holy Saturday, that agonizing pause between the crucifixion and the resurrection, when everything seemed irreversibly lost. During the death of Jesus on the cross, the Gospels record that darkness covered the whole land for several hours. This was not simply a meteorological event, it was a cosmic statement. The universe itself, recoiling at the murder of its creator, the light went out. And then, 3 days later, it returned in a form that no one had dared to imagine. This is the interpretive key that gives the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness its deepest meaning. It is not primarily a survival manual or a checklist of practical preparations. It is a theological image, an image of spiritual desolation, of the night that falls when a civilization loses its relationship with the sacred, and of the transformation that becomes possible precisely within that night. The darkness described is not the end of the story. It is the necessary condition for the dawn that follows. Understanding the instructions embedded in the prophecy through this lens changes everything. Stay inside your home in Christian tradition. The home has always been understood as a domestic church, the first place where faith is transmitted, where children learn to pray, where the family discovers that it is something more than a collection of individuals sharing the same roof. To stay inside during the darkness is to return to what is essential. It is to rediscover, stripped of every distraction and noise, the fundamental relationship between the human soul and its God. The shuttered windows are not a gesture of cowardice. They are an act of concentration, a turning inward toward the only light that cannot be extinguished. Pray without ceasing. Padre Pio was not a man who spoke about prayer in abstract or comfortable terms. He lived it with ferocious intensity. Those who knew him described hours spent in deep mental prayer, sometimes entire nights. He emerged from those seasons of prayer carrying something visible in his face, a peace that his visitors felt and could not explain. For him, prayer was not a religious performance or a social obligation. It was the breath of the soul, the most fundamental activity of a creature in the presence of its Creator. The call to unceasing prayer during the 3 days is a call to do, in an extreme and concentrated form, what every believer is already called to do every single day. Trust only in divine protection. This final instruction strikes at the heart of the Christian understanding of existence. We are not self-sufficient. We did not make ourselves. We cannot save ourselves by our own strength, our own cleverness, or our own accumulated resources. The 3 days of darkness, on this reading, is an invitation to let go of the illusion of control, to stop gripping so tightly the things we imagine protect us, and to open our hands to a God who asks only to be trusted. In the broader landscape of Christian prophecy, it is worth noting that the prophets of Scripture were rarely interested in simply predicting the future. Their primary vocation was to call people to conversion in the present. When they announced punishments or catastrophes, they did so as a form of pastoral mercy, an alarm loud enough to wake a sleeping people. And frequently, the announced punishment never came, precisely because the people heard the warning and changed their lives. The prophecy was never the final word. The conversion it provoked was the final word. Many serious theologians and spiritual directors have therefore urged a balanced approach to prophetic traditions like this one. It is not intellectually honest to dismiss them out of hand, as if God were somehow incapable of intervening in history in extraordinary ways. But it is equally unwise and spiritually dangerous to become fascinated by the dramatic details, to treat catastrophe as entertainment, or to allow fear to replace hope as the primary driver of one's religious life. Christian faith does not rest on the fear of darkness. It rests on the certainty of resurrection. After every Good Friday, without exception, comes Easter Sunday. The figure of Padre Pio, canonized by Pope John Paul II in the year 2002 before a crowd of hundreds of thousands in Rome, is associated above all with mercy and with the sacrament of reconciliation. Millions of people have approached the confessional because of his witness, because something in his example reminded them that God is not waiting to condemn but waiting to embrace. If we ask today about the 3 days of darkness, perhaps the most important question is not when will they come, but am I spiritually ready? Am I at peace with God? Do I live in a state of grace? Do I love the people around me? Have I forgiven those who have wounded me? There is also a deeply personal dimension to all of this. Every human life contains its own 3 days of darkness. Seasons of illness, grief, failure, spiritual dryness, or family crises, in which everything seems to go black and God seems utterly absent. In those moments, the invitation to stay in the house takes on an intimate meaning. It is the invitation to remain within oneself, to descend like the prodigal son in the Gospel into the depths of one's own poverty, and there to find the Father who has been waiting all along. The blessed candle in this reading is the fragile but inextinguishable flame of faith, which continues to burn even when everything around it has gone dark. The number 3 itself repays careful attention. In Christian tradition, it evokes the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and above all the 3 days between the death and resurrection of Christ. A darkness that lasts 3 days is a darkness that has an ending built into its very structure. It cannot last forever. It is shaped from the inside by the pattern of Easter. This means that whatever darkness comes, whether it descends on a civilization or on a single human heart, it carries within it the seed of mourning. Padre Pio warned explicitly against excessive curiosity about the future. He consistently redirected those who came to him with anxious questions about what was to come, pointing them instead toward the demands and the beauty of the present moment. The past, he said, is under the mercy of God. The future is under His providence. The present is under our love. This is not a passive attitude. It is a radical one. It places the entire weight of spiritual responsibility on what is happening right now. In this relationship, this prayer, this act of forgiveness, this moment of choosing faith over fear, whether the 3 days of darkness is a literal future event or a powerful metaphor for our times, and thoughtful people of faith will disagree on this. Question: the message it carries is urgent and real. When the world seems to be plunging into darkness, the believer is called not to panic, but to become a light. Not a light of their own making, but a reflection of the light of Christ. To stay inside is to guard the heart. To pray without ceasing is to keep the relationship with God alive through every hour of the night. To trust in divine protection is to acknowledge, humbly and with full seriousness, that we are not alone, not even in the darkest of the dark. Padre Pio repeated it often, in those simple words that have outlasted so many elaborate doctrines and dramatic predictions: pray, hope, and don't worry. Perhaps nothing he ever said captures his teaching more completely. If days of darkness come, whether they arrive from outside or rise from within, the path forward remains exactly what it has always been: faith, hope, and love. Because no darkness, however absolute, however long, can extinguish the light that comes from God.